Thank you for your service. But if you are in Abilene for any length of time, you know that the military population is pretty significant. Well, what happens with the military population, and Adam and I are veterans ourselves, as are most every single person on our staff. So this program is particularly meaningful to us. Of course, it wasn't around when I retired, so I'm a little jealous. But the program is excellent. And of course, the intent for SkillBridge, as the name implies, it is a way to bridge the gap between what military members have been exposed to during the time of their service and what they want to do, what they see in the future for life after the Air Force, which is the intent, to bridge that gap. As it mentions here, it's available only for members who are within the last 6 months. Now, this could be somebody who's only been in the Air Force for one enlistment. That may mean only maybe 3.5 years on a 4-year enlistment. It could be somebody who's been in for 10 years, 12 years, or all the way to 20 years and beyond. There's no restriction on that. Timing restriction is just in that last 6 months so that they can beef up their resume. They can learn some real-world skills during that last 6-month period. I know for those of us who wear the uniform, the transition can be a little scary. And I've been retired for a long time, and longer than I care to tell you, but I do remember that trepidation of making that transition. I had worn that uniform for over 20 years. So what do you do when you move somewhere and you don't have a unit waiting for you, and you don't have an in-processing checklist? You don't have a CFETP, a career field training plan that tells you what to do. That's what our military is facing. Now, through all of their service, they've done wonderful things for our military, and they've done wonderful things for our country. Now they're facing the next chapter. So how can they be better prepared so that they don't have issues of joblessness? As you know, with veterans, that's a huge problem, which can lead to other things, financial concerns, housing issues, and so on. So not every military member who spent all of those years working on an airplane, for instance, wants to do that on the outside. We typically see people who are on one end or the other. I love airplanes, I've done them for years, that's all I want to ever do. And then you'll have people who will, yes sir? Yes sir? Yes. Is it? Oh my goodness. Yes. I'm just kidding, it's fine. Okay, better? Okay, so it sounds super loud to me, but okay. Thank you. What was I saying? Oh, thank you. Oh, no,
This particular program is for both enlisted and officers. There are a lot of things that are one side or the other, but this is one that we've seen. We've seen a number of officers go through the program, and some of them are junior officers, some of them are retiring lieutenant colonels. So it's something that it's not a one side of the house. So everything from executive type experience down to the maintenance type experience.
Thank you. The other end of that spectrum are the people who say, I've dealt with airplanes, that's all I've done for years on end, or whatever their career field may have been, and now for life after, I want anything but. I never want to touch a toolbox again. And so we have that same issue. Those people still want to have, those veterans still want to have successful careers. They want to do well for themselves, for their family, but they may not quite have the skill set if they want to do, particularly if they want to do something completely different, or if how we do it in the Air Force might be slightly different from how it's done on the outside. Under this program, as I mentioned, in the last 6 months and with commander's approval, members are eligible to do one of 4 different types of training with community partners, whether those community partners are here in Abilene or even in other locations. What we want to do is, of course, increase and beef up and strengthen the community involvement here in Abilene. We'd love to keep people here. This is a great town. My husband and I came here. We're both retired military, but we came here on purpose. We had visited many times. We came here with the intent to retire and stay. So we see the benefits here. We want to bring people here. So these are the 4 areas that military members might be able to come during that last 6 months and work with your company. It could be either what we have seen here at Dyess as the most popular is the internships, the first one that I mentioned up there. It's a rather broad term, and it generally means that that person's going to come and work with you at your business in a time frame that works for you and for that member. And they learn everything as similar to a new worker at your place as possible. They learn the work, they learn the business side of doing things, they're fully immersed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. They may also do on-job training, which is literally hit the ground running. Learn as you go. You're actively incorporating that person into the workplace right away. Now, the apprenticeships are a little bit different. Apprenticeships, those are the ones that have to be on the DoD list. So those aren't as plentiful, perhaps, but it is an avenue. It's a more structured type of program. And then, of course, that last one was job shadowing, and that could be where somebody is able to just come and be a fly on the wall. Watch what happens. That might be one day, a few days, whatever, but that's more for them to not be actively involved, but to watch. But those are the 4 categories, the 4 avenues that they have under this SkillBridge program that they may be able to have that time with you out there in your company. Now, hopefully, y'all can see some benefits, even just in that little bit that we've said about it so far. But just to highlight how this can be helpful for you, what's that first one say? How much does it cost you? That should be great, right? That looks really good on your ledger. That the the input the help that you can receive in compared to the dollars that you're spending out. This is obviously an excellent opportunity. As it goes on to say, you're in essence getting a free hired hand, and it can be seen as an extended job interview. Now, keep in mind, there's no guarantee you're under no obligation to offer anyone who may come to you. You're not obligated to offer them a full-time position, but of course, in a perfect world, that would be a great win-win, right? You get to see them in action. They get the time to learn how your company works. The real life, no kidding, day in, day out kind of experience that it takes to be successful. And you get to see them. What do they bring? They've got all of these amazing skills as a military member. You talk about dedication, loyalty, mission focus, team effort. You've got all of that. And this is somebody who's choosing to come and work with you. So you get to see all of that as well. So they're beefing up that package, right? So that they can be more competitive with that. If that's with you, that's great. They can be more competitive. You've seen them in action, and you may want to keep them on. That could be a total win-win. It may turn out that they end up doing something very similar, but maybe in a different location, and they've built up skills. You feel good for your community, your peers in another location perhaps, who would benefit from hearing your words as a reference, if nothing else. But you get the benefit of that person working with you during that window of time. And since they are Air Force members, while they're doing it, they are active duty Air Force members. That's why there's no pay required. So you're not out any money. They're still active duty members, so you don't have to worry about that part of it. Ideally, it's going to offer a good chance. This should be something that, remember, they're seeking you out as well, right? They want to learn your side of doing business. They want to learn the type of work that you do. So it's not a matter of, some lotto system and you're the name that got drawn and some person's just going to go. They're seeking out what you do. That's where their interest lies. So you've got somebody who's purposefully coming and seeking that out from you. Keep in mind, they are an active duty member, as I mentioned before. You may run into an instance where that commander may have need of that member to come back, do something on the base. Since they're here in town, it wouldn't be too difficult, but do keep that in mind. They are an active duty military member. And the other thing that's cool about it is because you're local, if this was something that worked out for you, you have a lot more options locally for people here at Dyess. They may be able to come and only get away maybe 3 days a week or for 30 days versus, they can't get away for 60 or 90. With you being local, so much more flexibility, right? For members to come and work with you, still be able to convince that commander to let them go for a minute and go and learn this skill. And our commanders are getting smarter on the program. We've seen a lot of support. So that side of it, as far as we have seen, hasn't been an issue. But we do always make sure to point that out, that the commanders do have to agree to let these members go and support this program. So obviously you have a leg up being local, that you can bring people in that maybe somebody would may not think they're going to stay in Abilene. You may change their minds. Just saying, they may love you. And they may choose to stay here, right? How's it going so far? Y'all with me? Great and wonderful things? You love it? Just check it. Is food good? Yeah, okay. That's good too. All right. Now, Adam has worked through a lot more of the basic steps. So he's going to kind of show you that, kind of walk you through how that works. What he's given you right now is a copy of the vetting checklist, it's called. This is a mandatory part of the process, right? Because it's the Air Force, so there's paperwork. This is a copy of what the military member would actually include. It's not everything, but it's a critical part of what the military member is going to fill out as part of the application process. And you'll see, I believe it's at the top of, I think, page 3, there's a little segment that is filled out by the provider. And again, replace CSP with SkillBridge. And it outlines what you are agreeing to as a community partner. As the training provider, this is what you are agreeing to. So we wanted you to just kind of see what that looks like. The member is responsible to fill it out, but it does have that one segment on training provider.
So the vetting checklist that you see there, so the basic paperwork that the military member is filling out is the vetting checklist. And you can see it's a real fill-in-the-blank thing. The member is going to put their information on there. The company that they are going to is putting their information on there. There's some boxes for the internship. And what we've seen at Dyess exclusively is people are participating in quote-unquote internships. And what we know is that the Major Command and Air Force is saying they're streamlining the process a little bit. They're making it a little more user-friendly. And the vetting checklist is the longest document that they have to fill out. And you can see in there that it's really not, this is not quantum physics that they're filling out. The big thing that we've seen is when we submit a name to our MAGCOM, our Major Command, which is Global Strike, if somebody is doing their SkillBridge out of town, greater than 50 miles away, or, I was working one this morning, the guy's going to Michigan. There is an additional piece of paperwork that has to get completed. It's called permissive TDY. That just means they're going to be somewhere else doing something else while they're, still in the military. And that form gets submitted. The vetting checklist gets submitted. There's a commander's letter that looks kind of like page 1. It's got the member's information, the commander's information, the brief information on the Career Skills Program or SkillBridge, and then the member signs it and the commander signs it. So that's a document. The vetting checklist. If they're out of town, permissive TDY, and then a unit point of contact letter, which we believe is probably going to go away. It's still required in the packages. We think it's going to go away because a point of contact is identified in the vetting checklist, so it duplicates. But that's it as far as the paperwork. So when someone comes to us and says, so I've heard about the Career Skills Program or SkillBridge, most of them are saying, I've done the research, this is where I want to go, what I want to do. Some of them, and this is where I would encourage all of you in here, if you want to send Jackie and myself an email with your name, your business, and what an internship could look like at that company. I've got essentially a binder that when our Air Force functional sends us, hey, here's a universal program that is members are utilizing, it goes in that binder. But I've also got local companies that have reached out to me, and that's always something when I have that initial conversation. If somebody says, well, I've heard about this program and I'm still not sure what I want to be when I grow up, I hand them the binder and say, look through here, these are some options that you can do. So I would encourage all of you to send me your information, because if somebody says, hey, come from a long line of plumbers, but I don't want to go back home to Michigan, I want to be right here in Abilene, you have any companies, I'm going to show them the binder, and I'm going to say, here's one that I know has reached out to us. Now, if they have already reached out to ABC Plumbing Company, and ABC Plumbing Company sees the vetting checklist and says, hey, yeah, we could use you as an intern. But if you're in that binder, they're going to see you. So I would encourage you to, like I said, send us your your information. You can see on the vetting checklist there's also a description. Sometimes what I will have, it's a description of what the position entails. And a lot of times it looks like the company's just kind of cut and pasted from their job. We call them position descriptions. They've got that in there. The physical requirements of the position. Yeah, we will have oftentimes, well, not anymore because we won't push it up to our MAGCOM. If someone's going out of town, then we're not a disapproval authority. Our MAGCOM is not a disapproval authority. The approval authority for this program is the member's commander. If he or she says, yep, you can do it, then the member's going to be able to participate in a SkillBridge event. Our MAGCOM simply reviews packages that are out of town. That's a piece that for everyone in here, theoretically, we wouldn't have to refer it to our MAGCOM and say, hey, would you look at this member's SkillBridge application and make sure everything is squared away. Now, the honest answer there is before we send a name to our MAGCOM, we make sure it's squared away. We don't want the MAGCOM to come back and say, well, this date is off, or they said it was 30 days, but I'm doing the math, it's 40 days. We're going to review it before we send it to them. Now, for local stuff, though, like I said, that's a piece that gets, it's not required in the package. Yes? MAGCOM, Major Command. So you have Air Force, and then under the Air Force there are major commands, Air Combat Command, Air Force Global Strike. We're under Air Force Global Strike Command. So it's in Barksdale in Louisiana. So our MAGCOM, like every base that we're a Global Strike, we're also ACC, we're also Air Mobility at Dyess. But our MAGCOM, we just have a human that oversees our role, essentially. So they look at the package and say everything's good, or nope, you need more information here or there. So these are the basic steps, which you've been reading as I've been talking. You get the briefing from one of us, and essentially they're doing some research on where they might want to go. The vetting checklist is what you have in your hand. The additional program requirements, like I mentioned, just the paperwork. Once approved, the member begins the program. Now, it's 180 days. We have at the end of an Air Force career, whether it's a separation or a retirement, you accrue leave, earned vacation time, if you will. And most people have between 30 and 60 days of what's called terminal leave at the end. The max that you're going to get to do in a SkillBridge is 180 days out from your hard date of separation. If your date of separation, leaving the military, is July 1st, 180 from that, calendar days, not work days or anything, 180 calendar days, that's the max that you'd be able to do a SkillBridge. If you have, say, 30 days of terminal leave and you want to take that at the end, then the math there says the max you're going to do is 150-day SkillBridge, because has to be in that last 180 days, okay? So let me tell you a few of the CSPs that we have seen, or SkillBridge internships that we've seen. We had an individual who was in maintenance and fantastic at his job. He was a non-commissioned officer, staff sergeant, and got his A&P license, airframe and power plant mechanic license, because, kind of the unwritten rule is if you want to turn wrenches on a plane off the base, you're going to do it with your A&P license. So he used funding to get his A&P license, and then he went to American Airlines or Eagle Aviation and said, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do in the Air Force, and I've got my A&P license. Am I good to apply for a job? And they said, well, technically, yes. However, we prefer that you have worked under licensed A&P mechanics. He knew about the program. This was one of the first ones that we had at Dyess. One of the first participants came, and we were working with him. We were working with our Air Force counterpart. Essentially, he did 110 days where he was working for 110 days, not wearing a uniform, still active duty Air Force, going out to a hangar at the airport and working under licensed A&P mechanics. They offered him a job 2 or 3 weeks into it. He said, well, can't yet. And they offered him a job closer to the end, when at that point he knew he was separating. Well, he knew he was separating, but at that point he knew he was going back to Colorado. And he fessed up and said, been a great experience, but I'm going back to Colorado. And the supervisor said, well, at a minimum, use me as a reference. I've been a licensed A&P mechanic, doing it my whole civilian career. I'd be happy to use me as a reference. I'll tell anybody that you're a great mechanic. To us, that's a win, because that's a valuable thing to have on his resume. We've got individuals now. I've got somebody who's going to be working lines with Taylor Electric, and they're doing 45 days is what they're asking for. I've got another guy, the one I was working this morning, he's going back home to Michigan, and he is going to be working with, he's a maintenance troop, he's going to be working with Duncan Aviation, essentially turning wrenches on civilian airplanes. So we've seen a lot of different opportunities, and I kind of pursued this the same way as far as the higher education college piece. If somebody comes into my office and says, hey, I heard we can get tuition assistance to go to college, I want to do that. Okay, great, we can work with you. And then they say, so what degree should I get? Well, I'm not going to tell you what degree to get. I can have the conversation and see what might be a fit for you and talk about schools that you could attend. You want to do online, you want to do in residence, what do you want to do? Are you doing it while you're in? Are you going to use your GI Bill? I can have that conversation with you. In this one, because it really, I almost wish the word personal was in it instead of SkillBridge. Somehow have the word personal in it because it is very personal. You know, if somebody said, I'm not sure what I want to be when I grow up, I'm going to hand them the binder. I'm going to talk about things that they may do, and I'm going to talk about, you know, SkillBridge things that members have done from Dyess. But at the end of the day, there's a lot on the member still to say, you know, this, I've done the research and this is where I want to go and this is what I want to do. So these are some of the examples that we have local right here that people have used. And like I said, it's an officer and an enlisted thing. We had a lieutenant colonel at Fort Hood at one of it's our what's called our GSU, or Geographically Separated Unit, and he was a tactical air control, which basically means you go to the war and you call in airstrikes. Pretty intense job. His career skills program, or SkillBridge, was back in Louisiana at his home church. He's taken over the business side of a church, and he's doing 35 days of SkillBridge there, just enough to bring him up to speed, get used to their systems, because his undergraduate and graduate degrees were in business. So it's just, that's how he's doing his SkillBridge. So it really is individual to the person. So what kind of questions do you have? There's got to be some questions. Yes? To where? We have not yet. We've seen some. Who was it that came from the chamber? Yeah, Mr. Bridwell. So we've spoken to Gray Bridwell, and we're at the point now. That just got louder. That's weird. I'm going to do this. We're at the point now where we're seeing. We probably have 25 active cases that we're working, and 10 of them are. Have done them or are doing them. But right now, the honest answer is, I'd have to look at the total numbers. It's a small percentage that stays local. Most everybody, you know, Dyess is, sometimes people come to Dyess because they want to get closer to home, which is San Antonio. But because somebody can do this opportunity, I mean, the guy this morning is going to Michigan. We've had people go to Seattle. We've had people go to California and Florida. We've only had a couple of them stay local, but there are a lot of people who I know retire in Abilene. We have an individual who is going to be working at one of the local banks. This is a retiring senior master sergeant, has his degrees in essentially accounting and finance, and he's going to be doing his SkillBridge at one of the local banks, which is I think they said there's 70 just in the state of Texas. So it's big. But as we have not, the honest answer is we haven't fully briefed it to the base yet. We have what's called a town hall coming up that we're briefing it on. And then every month we brief on like the GI Bill and commissioning opportunities. We're adding it to the base briefs as far as a monthly, get the information out there. But other than speaking with Mr. Bridwell, I mean, that would be, we'd be happy to brief to a population like that. Oh, for sure.
So who assumes the liabilities for workers' comp, things like that?
Essentially, because the member is still
Passive.
active duty, they're covered, you know, the health-wise. Now, what we don't know, and we haven't had to push an issue, say, to our major command, if an individual were injured on the job, they're still going to be covered as a military member. So I could get additional information on the workers' comp piece. We'd heard that was one of the little buzz pieces when they met and they said, hey, we're streamlining the process, which if you saw all the paperwork that somebody had to submit, it's really not daunting. But we feel that information is going to be in the guide that comes out with it. So it's pretty clearly identified because you're getting someone who was, until they started in your company, a viable asset to the United States Air Force. But we haven't seen any kind of injury. You have to be pretty specific on the requirements of the job. And if we have somebody who is being medical evaluation boarded out of the Air Force because they've had to, have both their rotator cuffs fixed, and we're looking at their CSP and it says you're going to be required to lift up to 150 pounds over your head, we could look at that and go, And in that case, to be honest with you, if that individual's commander had approved that, we can't disapprove it, but we have to make our MAGCOM aware of, hey, we got a unique situation going on. As of yet, luckily, we haven't had to worry with any type of injury because they're still active duty. So, it's a good question.
If you're in a profession where there are certain safety requirements, there's hard hats, there are steel-toe boots, there's certain outer gear, or anything like that, the same thing would apply for this member. I mean, if they're going to be in that same environment, doing that same kind of work, the expectation would be that they would have that same kind of added measure of protection. If there is potentially some kind of upfront training that the member would be required to do, we've seen it both ways. Some training, there's not a cost associated with it. Some training, there might be a cost associated with it. Perhaps there's a certain certification or other type of requirement that would make that member eligible to do the work that you do. That would be a discussion to have with that member because they have options, and there may be options on the Air Force side of the house that may give them that type of training or certification that allows them to work with you. It's not expected that there would be an exception. They should have the same requirement, if there is one, a pre-requirement for whatever work that you have that you would need them to do. So certainly ask those questions. And again, with this being pretty new, there's a lot of questions we expect to come up along the way, and that's what we're here for. We will intercede on those questions. We will always make sure that we've got clarification, either from the MAGCOM or from AFPC if needed, Air Force Personnel Center, the Air Force level for this information. So anything that comes up like that, any specified things, we would certainly make sure we're working with you. And that's the cool thing about us all being right here. Because we can come to you. We can. A matter of fact, that event that I just handed out the flyer for, that is on the 30th of May, here in a couple of weeks on the base. Adam and I are going to do, first off, an information presentation to the base, just to clarify process-wise what it means for our military members. What we decided to do was expand that and bring to that event some of the community partners here in town, not only ones who have already been participating with us, but even those of you who may be interested going forward, that you're able to come out to the event, bring your information table with flyers or information about your company and how you think you may be able to interact, how you think you might bring military members on board. And this would be a great way, because we don't want to just stand up and talk process pieces to the military. Here's the paperwork you're going to fill out, get your commander's approval, thank you very much. We want to make it a little more real, a little more interactive, where they can actually see. We're going to bring a couple of folks who have already entered into the program locally that are going to talk about what they've done. And as I mentioned, the companies who come, you will have the ability during the panel, we're calling it kind of a panel presentation. We'll give information, and then we'll allow those of you who are there to say, kind of like you did today, here's who I am, here's the company that I represent, here's how I think that we would be able to help military members, this is kind of who I'm looking for. And that puts your name, your face, your company's name right in front of anybody who shows up that day, but also, as Adam was mentioning, into our resources for the future also. And keep in mind, this isn't a broad stroke. Like if you say, yes, I want to be a community partner, that doesn't mean somebody's going to show up on your doorstep one day and go, I'm here. Thank you very much. I'm starting right now. That's not going to be that's not going to be what happens. It is a personal relationship every single time. You, the company, has to sign for that member on that vetting checklist that you saw for every single member. So it isn't like an all or nothing, and anybody who wants it's just going to show up. It's much more personal than that. So you will always have that conversation with the member before anything is signed or sealed, of course. What else? What
Jackie,
questions?
I have a question. Sorry.
That came from behind me, but you're over there. Okay. Yes, sir.
One of the things that I thought about when I first found out about this program, folks that have startups or fairly new businesses and that kind of thing, it seems to me that a lot of times in that situation, you build your business to a certain extent, and then you've not quite got enough business to hire somebody, and and I think, but yeah, you've got more business than what you feel like you can handle yourself sometimes. And I was just wondering, from a profile standpoint, if this might be a good program to fill in the gap like that to build the business. How do you feel about that?
I think that's a great fit because again, it's about the training, the relationships, what the company can benefit from that by having that person there, learning, getting familiar, feeling what it's like to go somewhere in something besides the uniform. That took a while just to buy clothes. Just point that out. Usually, when you're told for years and years what to wear every day, even that environment. Getting into that environment, seeing what that's like, hearing the terminology, learning how that flows. And there's not a guarantee on either side in these internships or in these partnerships. There's no guarantee on either side. If it lends itself to that, that would be wonderful. But if the skills are gained and that veteran walks out the door more able to be competitive, whether it's here in town or somewhere else, then you've gained as a company by having that person there with you. That member has gained through the experience and the time that they've spent with you, and now they've got hopefully a really strong reference, as we mentioned before. So even if they're not with you, that somebody in that same field, you've helped a community grow stronger by bringing in a skilled veteran to wherever they end up. And that could be really helpful, especially for smaller businesses. It's all about that. It's a win-win on both sides. That's the whole intent. Thank you for asking.
Are there any more questions from anybody?
Yes, sir.